I'm installing this leaning steering modification on my cousin's SR2 and ran into some issues with the movable shock mounts jamming. Didn't have this issue when I installed this modification on my sled, and I figured some things out here. So I thought I'd do a quick video, share some tips on how to make this installation and have it all work for you. I've also came up with a second version of the movable shock mount, which I'll share on the SR2 Discord forum. So let's get into it. Here's the original design. This is the same design that I shared on the SR2 Discord forum. And when I designed it, I designed a length from here to here for these ball ends that I used from my helicopter spares. These were the shortest ball ends that I had. And between this measurement here and these ball ends, it gave me a distance which gave me a straight shot with my linkage to my servo arm. The problems start when you are using taller or longer ball ends. As you increase this length from here out to the center of the ball end, it changes that angle on the link. But I think the bigger issue, more so than that change in angle, as this gets longer, it gets more leverage and it starts flexing the upper part of this movable shock mount. Watching it work, when I had it installed in the sled, I can see that jamming taking place on the dovetail when this length is longer. Here is the short version of the movable shock mount, and I've shortened this length by 3/16 of an inch. This is the original design with my shortest ball end in there, and I've now switched and put my longest ball end in the short version. From the end view, you can see with the original design and the shortest ball end, the short version with the longest ball end is still slightly shorter. This measurement from here to the center of the ball end. I think this is going to be a better design, probably work better for everybody depending on what ball end you use. And I've tested it with the short version and the shortest ball end, and the link doesn't hit the side of the frame. So I think this will work better for everyone with this length being shorter and it not having leverage or having less leverage to flex the movable shock mount and cause it to jam. Here is the short version of the movable shock mount, and I have it mounted in the sled with my shortest ball end. The servo arm is level, and as I move it through the full range of motion, you can see there's no clearance issues for the link. I've got a few more tips to share that I figured out trying to work out this jamming issue. Do not remove an excessive amount of material on these surfaces down the bottom, and definitely don't take any material off the dovetail. Other than scraping these corners of the dovetail, both corners, and these corners right here on the dovetail, take a minimum amount of material off of these surfaces to get it to slide freely. As I was trying to figure out this jamming issue, I took so much material off. See how this wiggles both ways? Well, that didn't help it any. It just, when it tries to pull it down, keep in mind it's pushing this shock down to try to push down this ski. It would just let it tip along with this longer length and just wedge. As loose as this is, right? When it pulled down from out here, trying to push the shock down, that would just, you can just see. You pull out here, it binds. And I have it that loose, it just falls. A dovetail is a lot like a V-thread. It rides on these two angles on the female dovetail and these two angles, both sides, on the male dovetail. Just like on a thread where you have a radius in the bottom of a V-thread, it's called truncation, and the major diameter is slightly smaller. So these corners on a thread or these corners on a dovetail need some clearance. I have these models sized where these angles on the dovetails should give you a fairly nice fit. What I have noticed printing is fits can change with how your nozzle's calibrated. Here's a good indicator. See how clean my top layers are? If you have excessive amount of filament flowing to where you got a lot of smearing on your top layers, you'll probably have an issue with the fits on these dovetails. More flow will make for a tighter fit. So let's talk about post-processing these printed parts. And my intention is not to talk to you guys like you don't know anything about printing, but I do want to share what I've done so that your modification will be as successful. These surfaces here, and in the bottom of the dovetail has that finish that's not as good as a top layer because it's printed like this. So it's printed on infill. So all I've done with my parts is any little hangers from the this surface from the infill, I'll scrape with a razor, and I take a jeweler's file and just knock off any little hangers down in the bottom. And then you can kind of go at this a little bit. I scrape these corners and these corners. That's just giving clearance. This is so you don't have hangers on the edge, which is riding on the frame here. And scraping these inside corners, also scraping the outside corners on the male with a razor, just gives clearance down in the bottom here and right up here when it's riding on the dovetail. So you should end up with a fit about like this, where it doesn't fall, but it also doesn't have any play. That's a nice fit on the male and female dovetail. It moves freely, and when it's in the fully upright position, you'll see a little bit of the male dovetail exposed. And then all the way down, it hits the stop on the inside female dovetail. So don't jam your servo there as far as how much travel you put on your servo. But this fit here might feel a touch sticky with no play. Either way, going back and forth this way. But now with this length here on the center of the ball end, shouldn't be any jamming issues. Here's a couple more tips for you. Put both of these links on the servo arm, fold them in like I have this one, fold this one down and that one down, rotate the servo arm in order to slip this servo in for mounting the servo. That's much easier than trying to put these ball links on down inside here. Next one is, now I have this shock mounted and I have this link connected, so I can check that side for jamming. You can see how free and smooth that works. So then pop this link off, mount this shock to the movable shock mount, and check the other side. Here it is looking at it from the front. You can see how it's compressing the shock, tipping the sled. And in the fully upright position, there's just a little bit of the male dovetail exposed. We want as much engagement in here as we can get. I now have this mod fully installed on this sled. After independently checking this side to make sure I wasn't getting any jamming issues, I've also found it's easier to attach this link before you mount the shocks. Do it in that sequence, you're not fighting the spring. Another change I made on this one is I've shortened the center to center distance on these links from 28 millimeters to 26 millimeters. Just set them with a ruler. And the reason for that is to get more fully engaged when the shock mounts in a fully upright position on the male dovetail. Here it is, fully installed with just this servo plugged into the steering channel. Just checking it out to make sure everything works as it should. And I'm making no apologies for how in-depth this video ended up being. I truly thought this would be another bolt-on modification doing this sled. So in a way, it's kind of a good thing that this happened to me. So now if others follow these tips that I've shared, should be the same, where you can do this modification and get the same result.